If you follow the news, you know that our world is not a pretty place to be. From multiple terrorist attacks and all sorts of crazy things in our economic system, our world just seems to be tumbling. But I think the worst is that intermixed with all of the um, terrorists and economic problems, we're seeing far too many stories of children that are being abused by their parents. They're being murdered by their parents because their parents have lost control and done something crazy. I just saw a story the other day about a 4-year-old who died because his mom stuck his legs in scalding hot water as a punishment. As a parent, I can't imagine. I have a 4-year-old, and I mean, don't get me wrong, he can be crazy and he can get on my last nerve when he's having a bad day. But it never crosses my mind to ever do anything remotely close to that. I don't even know how a parent has that thought. But seeing all these crazy stories makes you wonder, should parents have to have a license to procreate? Um, I'm kind of torn between this. I feel like as a mother, I would say yes. Yes, I see people constantly. I personally know a girl who shook her first baby. She had two more. I mean, granted, they're now finally have been adopted out to better families and things, but she should have never been allowed to have the second ones. Honestly, she should have never been allowed to have the first. I also know a girl who she has two kids that she was not a very good mother to, and then she found a new boyfriend, and that new boyfriend beat those children mercilessly, and landed them in the emergency room a few times uh, while she was high. And she doesn't care. She obviously didn't care about the safety of her children. And luckily for those children, they've been taken from her. But I just saw the other day that she's pregnant again. So I can only imagine the things that that child is in store for. This is kind of a rough side of it, though. You know, there's two sides of this. I feel like um, on the yes side of it, yes, parents should have to have a license. You know, I feel like yes, like you have to have a card to check out a book from a library. You have to have a license to drive a car. You have to have a license to be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. You know, things where you're involved with kids every day. So why not have to have a license to be a parent? You know, you should have to pass a test to make sure that you're competent enough to raise a child because it is by far the hardest thing that I'm doing. You know, raising three kids is not an easy task. Um, you know, and if you have a kid, you know, like, do you have a probationary period? You know, I think often, like, if they pass the test, but you should still, you know, my husband's on a probationary period for his new job. Like, he has to prove to them that he is worth keeping. So why should parents not have to prove that they're worth it? Like, that they can prove to the state or whatever that they are competent enough and clearly care enough for their children to raise them correctly. Why not have a probationary period? You know, and I feel like if you, on the other side of that, you know, and if you screw up, you know, if you screw up and you have too many DUIs or whatever, I think they give far too many chances for that, but you eventually get your license taken away, your driver's license taken away. So I feel like if you screw up with your kid and you shake your baby or you abuse your child, you're done. Like, I feel like that should be it. You don't get to have any more children. You shouldn't be allowed to screw up any more children. You know, I also think that there are so many unwanted pregnancies where people, you know, they have children and they can't take care of them. So those children are taken from the homes and put in foster care. You know, sometimes foster care can be okay, but a lot of times those kids don't find homes and they are just set up to have horribly rough lives because they don't know any different, you know. And I think that having to pass a test would keep a lot of kids out of the foster care system and a lot of unwanted babies from being brought into this world. You know, and I feel like too, you know, my dad always taught me to work hard for what I want. And every time I had to work hard for something as simple as if I wanted this pair of ridiculously expensive shoes, I worked hard for those. And because I worked hard for those, I cared for them a lot more than if somebody would have just bought them. And I feel like that's the same. If you're going to work hard to pass this test, then you're going to work hard to take care of your child. You know, there's all these great benefits of having it. You know, somebody's going to really care for these children and do what they can to make sure that they're raised wonderfully. Um, but on the opposite side of that, as a parent too, I worry about, that infringes on my rights as a parent. It infringes on a basic American right to do that. Also, I feel like psycho people could pass that test fine. You have psychopaths and sociopaths where they could easily go in and they could pass it, and then you don't know what they're gonna do with those children. And that's scary. But I guess the scariest thing for me as a parent is financially, we barely get by. My husband didn't finish his GED until he was in his mid 20s. I'm just now trying to further my education. Mental illness runs really deep in my family. So I feel like those tests, if they include financial portions, what if we weren't allowed to have children? Education. What if we weren't allowed to have our children? Or even the mental illness part. Like, what if people who really would be wonderful parents weren't allowed to have children because they can't meet these standards? I mean, I don't think I'm the world's perfect mom by any means, but I love my children and I devote everything that I do is to make their lives better. Um, and I couldn't imagine my life without them. They bring me such joy every morning when I wake up. Like, I'm so excited to just be their mom, and I'm so blessed to be their mom. Um, and I would hate to think that if I had to take a test that I wouldn't be allowed to have them, and then I don't know what I'd do. I've never wanted anything but to be a mom. Um, Becoming a teacher is kind of because eventually I have to have a job, and I love children, and I want to spread love to as many children as possible, and I feel like teaching is the best way to do that. But also, I think on the no side, besides my own personal um, fears of not being able to do that, but if there's all these people not allowed to procreate, I wonder if it would underpopulate our world. If we are, because who knows what the kind of tests we would have, and if like these standards are ridiculously high, how I don't think we'd be allowed to have. There would be enough children, or there'd be enough families to keep people from interbreeding, or whatever. So, um, I think that having a license to procreate is something that is never going to happen. I can clearly see both sides of it, on why you should and why you shouldn't. Um, I think for some people, I look at them and I think, oh, definitely you should have to have a license. And then I look at my life and I think, well, what if I had to have one? Um, so there's good and there's bad points to both sides, just like any story. But for now, it's something that will never happen. And I don't think that there's a true answer of which is worse or which is better.